How's everybody doing?
Good, brother.
Glad to see everybody out, continuing the lessons, learning what God can teach us from using animals. We've talked about the birds already, and now we're going to talk about how God uses donkeys in 3 specific instances to get his message across. Donkeys, they've been the burdens of beasts pretty well all through time, and before the 10th century they were the most common means that people traveled. So a lot of people, they didn't want to walk, you could ride the donkey. Donkeys generally symbolize times of peace, where horses would be times of war. So the armies usually rode back, and the generals, they would ride on horses, but even kings would ride on donkeys, and we'll see the King of Kings riding on a donkey tonight's lesson. Start out, we'll talk about Balaam and his talking donkey. So if God lets a donkey actually talk to you using a man's voice, it should get somebody's attention. But old Balaam, he was I guess his destiny was to get the money, and he had so much greed that he didn't even seem to be in awe when the donkey started talking. He'll go through 3 verses having a conversation with him, and without even falling down and worshiping God today. Now this is something that's it's a supernatural. Here's a miracle happening, and he doesn't seem to realize it. So what God's going to tell us today, so even apparent obstacles can be instruments of God's grace and protection. So God can use anything. Sometimes he'll put stuff in your way. He put something in Balaam's way to stop him. He tried to turn him back, but it took a lot of trouble, and Balaam still didn't quite get the message. So this lesson, the events in Numbers 22, it occurs right at the end of the 40 years of wandering of the Israelites in the desert. So it's the 40th year is going on. It's almost up. We're just months away from crossing the Jordan River. So first the Israelites, they start with the Amorites. So this is part of the Canaanite clan that they're supposed to be taking their land, but again, they haven't crossed the Jordan, so they're currently on the east bank of the Jordan. So they camped out in the plains of Moab, and the king of Moab, he gets a fear in his mind that, hey, the Israelites are going to take my land next. They've already conquered my neighbor, and now they're going to take my land. So if this king of Moab, if he had went back to his roots, if he had studied history, he would have known where he came from. So where does Moab come from in the Bible? Anybody know? So Moab would be, yes, he would be the firstborn son of Lot. So Lot being the nephew of Abraham, so he was right there. He knew the God of heaven. God saved his father Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah. So we know the story. So these are people that didn't have any knowledge of the true God. Of course, just like the Israelites, they started worshiping some false gods and got them in trouble. But they had the source there. It was right there. And if they had talked to Moses or talked to the Israelites, and they surely would have, they would have known Deuteronomy 2:9. God's already said, he says, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee their land for a possession, because I've already, in other words, I've already given it to Lot's descendants. So it's already, this is already given to Lot, because he, his honor for Abraham, and, Lot was raised by Abraham after Abraham's brother Haran died. So, he was not Abraham's son, but he was right there in the family. He was taking care of him like a son and watching over him. And he was even praying for him to get out of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we have people in our life to be praying for us. That's a big blessing. So again, the king of Moab, he listens to the devil, and he lets fear cause this whole situation. This whole thing that happened was caused out of fear. He didn't seek God's guidance. He didn't talk to Moses. He just went and, for fear, he said he went to the Midianites, his other neighbors, which technically were his enemies in the past. But he said, hey, let's get together and let's figure out a way to defeat these people. So the plan that the devil gave him was, let's get this guy named Balaam, this prophet, to curse. If we can just get this guy to curse Israel, then it'll weaken them. If God's against them, then surely we might be able to beat them, so we might be able to win. But again, there wasn't even going to be a fight if he had just relied on God and trusted God. But the devil said, just jump right into it. Find your own solution. The people do that today. We don't look to God for solutions. We want to find our own solutions. So that's a problem. We look to find our own solution. But anytime we listen to the devil and let fear be in our heart instead of looking for answers and peace from God, God's right there at the answer. He'd already written their answer down, in Deuteronomy that I read. They didn't have anything to fear, but the devil said, hey, this is bad. They're gonna wipe you out next. So he goes and he talks to, I'll say a little bit about Midian. So where does Midian, where do we find Midian in the Bible? So all these people, all three groups, we know where the Israelites are, now we know where the Moabites are. But what about the Midianites? Did they have any connection to the Israelites? So where do we see Midian in the Bible? You may know. So Midian was a son of Abraham. He was the fourth of the 6 sons born to Abraham when he married Keturah after Sarah died. So, again, the Midianites, Abraham was their father, their true father also. So they knew about the God of heaven. They knew about Abraham's God. So again, they weren't completely in the dark. But again, they weren't turning to God. They were just, they were just looking for a fight. So they went along with the Moabites and they said, well, let's go get together, send their a gift and a bunch of their high-ranking princes, and let's go talk to this prophet Balaam, and let's see if we can get him to curse Israel. So first they send the first group to talk to Balaam, and he says, wait here, let me pray, and let me ask God about it tonight, and I'll let you know what he says. It comes back the next morning, and we'll read verse 12. It's the key to his problems. We're in Numbers 22, verse 12. It says, and God said unto Balaam, thou shalt not go with them, thou shalt not curse the people, for they are blessed. Clearly, God's telling him 3 things. So he went to God. God directly spoke to him. He gave him, he told him some things. He says, you cannot curse them. You must not curse them. You can't go with them, for they're blessed. So God's already blessed them. Again, I think Balaam already knew who these people were. They've been wandering in the wilderness now for 40 years, circling around their lands. And it wasn't just a couple of guys on a donkey. This was, a crowd of 1 million plus people traveling, rotating around with their herds. So he knew who they were. Definitely Balak knew who they were, but they were looking to the wrong sources. But the key to this whole thing is in verse 12. If Balaam had just listened when God told him this, then he would have went and reported these exact things. It says in verse 13, it says, and Balaam rose up in the morning and said unto the princes of Balak, get you to your land, for the Lord refuseth to give me leave to go with you. So the princes of Moab left. So what did Balaam do wrong? So God told Balaam some important information, and he failed to present it to these princes that had come to him. All he said is, God wouldn't let me go, suggesting I wanted to go, but God wouldn't let me go. He didn't say, God won't let me go, because he says, don't go, don't curse these people, because God's already blessed them. He left out the 2 big pieces of information. If they'd known that, they would have gone, well, let's go find somebody else that might curse them. But since he left it, 2 of the important pieces of information covered up, he was hoping they'd come back, and they do come back. They send him. Yep. So he's trying to negotiate with the devil. Instead of resisting the devil where he'd flee from him, he's negotiating. Well, let's leave the door open, maybe they'll come back, and of course that's exactly what they did. But his problems occurred because he didn't tell the people what God said. He just told them one piece of what they said. we've been studying the gifts of the Spirit in our Wednesday night sessions, and it's been giving us lots of information. So everybody be here for Wednesday night again. Make sure you're here, and we continue in this lesson. This may be the finish up, might be the last one. The conclusions. We don't want to miss the conclusions, for sure. But in verse 12 of chapter 22, so if we're in the New Testament, or if we were today, and God came along and told somebody these exact three things that he told Balaam, which one of the gifts of the Spirit would that represent? So we talked about the 9 and went through some definitions. And so if you're going to pick one, which of the gifts of the Spirit would Numbers 22 and 12 represent? So I'm going to leave this one with you as your extended lesson. I'll let you do some studying and pondering on this for tonight. So again, if we were in the New Testament or we were here today and God told us these three things, what gift of the Spirit would be working. And also go ahead and read over into all the chapters from 22 to 24, and look in chapter 24 and point out another gift of the Spirit that would be working in chapter 24. So that's your extended lesson to apply some of what we've learned. But after Balaam rises up the next morning, he tells him to go on. He leaves out two important pieces of information, and that's where our lesson picks up in the verses, verse 15 through 27. It says, "And Balak sent yet again princes more and more honorable than they. They came unto Balaam and said unto him, Thus saith Balak the son of Zippor, Let nothing, I pray thee, hinder thee from coming unto me, for I will promote thee unto very great honor, and I will do whatsoever thou sayest unto me. Come therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people." So Balaam got exactly what he was planning on doing. So again, at first they came with a gift. So they came with a gift to give the prophet, and it was common in that day to give gifts, but you shouldn't be a prophet for hire. It's great to give men of God, payment, to help them out, give them gifts, but the problem became for Balaam, I think at one point he was a great prophet. So he, even the whole region, especially the king of Moab, that's what he saw, is that he said, whoever Balaam curses is cursed, and whoever he blesses is blessed. But that created pride, because of course the king of Moab messed it up. It's whoever God blesses or curses is who's ever really blessed or cursed. It was just, he was using this prophet to do his work, to say what he said. But Balaam, he got some pride in his heart because he was listening to, hey, I'm doing this great thing. So it's great to work for God, and we should be working for God, but never get in your heart that, you're doing anything important. You're just a vessel working for God. If you're a worker working for God, you're not the king. We're just all workers working, in the same body together for the same purpose, promote the Great Commission, help people to get saved and get the body of Christ together and in love and get us to heaven together. So that's our goal. But Balaam was missing this. So they send a lot more honorable, higher up ranking princes. Now the king says, I'll give you whatever you want. And that's unfortunately what Balaam wanted to hear. It says, "And Balaam answered and said unto the servants of Balak, If Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do less or more." So that sounds like a good statement. But within this, he's throwing out the possibility that, hey, I need a great gift. Fill up a whole house full of gold and silver, that much weight. He didn't say it would get his attention. He still says, I've still got to do what God says. But we can see that the greed is in there, and we'll look at some other verses in the Bible that talk about Balaam, and we'll see the greed that was there. It says, "Now therefore I pray you, tarry ye also hear this night that I may know what the Lord will say unto me more. So again, this was a great caravan of princes, high-ranking princes of two nations, both of Moab and of Midian. So there's a lot of people that came. Of course, they were carrying gifts, and what did they have to have? They had to have soldiers to guard them. Because guess what? Here's an army. What they see as an army that's ready to wipe them out. So they didn't come with just a couple of people. This was a big procession. So these were nomadic people. They lived in tents. So when he said, tarry with me, he didn't say, oh, y'all just settle here in my tent. He was saying, stay right here around this area, and I'll see what God says, and I'll talk to you in the morning. Verse 20, again, is key. It says, and God came unto Balaam at night and said unto him, if the men come to call thee, rise up and go with them. But yet the word which I shall say unto thee, that shall you do, shalt thou do. So the key word there is the little word if in there. Again, Balaam is messing up. God's already told him, he said, don't go, don't curse them, because God's blessed them. So he's already told him it's sin. He says, this is my chosen people, you can't do this. He's already told him it's sin, but now Balaam is going to God to negotiate. People ever do that today? Do they ever go to God and say, well, if I can just do this one little thing, I know it's not what you want me to do. It's not really right, but it's not so bad, so if I can do this, it'll help out. And whatever your excuse is, and however you try to negotiate this with God, we can negotiate good things with God. He wants to give his children great gifts. But if you ask God, hey, allow me to sin, it's not going to work. That's what Balaam is doing. He's going back to God and saying, can I do this? I know that you told me no before, but you told me it was sin, but let me do it anyway. But he says, if the men come to call thee, rise up. But the next verse it says, and Balaam rose up in the morning and saddled his ass and went with the princes of Moab. He didn't even wait for him to come and call him. God says you can only go if the men come to call you. He's already told him not to go. But now when you read this, if you read it carefully, you'll see that God didn't say, go so I can take an angel and with a sword and kill you. That wasn't his intent. He'd already told him not to go, but he keeps asking. So sometimes he's asking God to let him, travel in a path of sin, and God's not going to sanction that, but at some point, God will use your actions to get those cursings upon you if you're trying to sin. He did it with the king of Babylon. He says God sets up kingdoms and he pulls down kingdoms. So God used Babylon to destroy Israel, to carry them away captive. Even destroyed the temple because they didn't listen. He'd already prophesied, sent his prophets, said you've got to stop doing what you're doing, get out of sin, but they wouldn't listen. So he uses Babylon to conquer Israel, but still then Babylon ends up paying because their kingdom is destroyed because of what they destroyed the temple. They killed a lot of Israelites. They carried them away captive. So they had to pay, but it was all in God's plan of how it worked. So he can use some things to bring judgment upon people, but that wasn't, still he's got grace. We'll see that even though this angel of the Lord's going to stand in the way ready to kill Balaam, God has enough grace that he again tries to save him multiple times with a miracle. Again, that's that would be right there in those gifts of the Spirit also. It's definitely a miracle if a donkey talks with a man's voice, right? We don't see that very often. You might see it on a TV show, but as far as in life, if an animal, whether it's a donkey or a cow or whatever, starts talking to you, Wesley, it might get your attention. It should. This is not a normal thing. There's something supernatural going on here. Going to verse 22. Well, first, any questions or comments on any of those verses we've covered so far? Anybody have any comments on what's happening with Moab and Balaam? In verse 22 it says, and God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. Now he was riding upon his ass, and his two servants were with him. So again, he's doing exactly what God didn't want him to do. He didn't follow even the if up there and wait for the men to come and call. So he's messing up in multiple ways. So God's wanting to change his ways, but he doesn't. He could have changed his way by just stopping his heart that morning. He meant to let him wake up and get up, but he let him get up. He's got this angel with his sword drawn, ready to kill him. It says, and the ass saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand, and the ass turned aside out of the way and went into the field, and Balaam smote the ass and turned her into the way. So this donkey sees the angel. He can see something that Balaam can't see. Balaam's blinded by greed, so he doesn't even see this angel of the Lord ready to kill him. So the donkey turns to the side. I can see him almost turning around. We got to get out of here. Let's go back. But what does Balaam do? He strikes him, so he hits him. He's trying to save him. He did actually save him. The angel's going to say, I would have killed you already, but spared the donkey, but all the donkey is doing is saving your life. And the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall on that side. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself into the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, and he smote her again. So now he's going between two walls, and again, the donkey can clearly see that if he keeps on this path that his master is going to be killed, but so this time he puts some pain, gets some pain on Balaam. So just think, the first turn was easy. It was just out in the open field. It didn't cause Balaam any pain. But if God can't get your attention, you won't just listen to him, then he might have to cause you some pain. And still to save you, now he crushed his foot. It was broken, but it's definitely injured. He's got a lot of pain going on, but what does he do? Does he turn around and say, this is probably not a good trip. Maybe I should just go home. Maybe God's trying to tell me something. Instead, he just gets mad. He uses one of those works of the flesh. He gets anger and wrath, and he just smites the donkey again. And then when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself into the wall. His foot gets crushed. And the angel of the Lord, so it goes a little further. Now this is the third time. Now he stood in a narrow place where there's no way to turn either to the right hand or the left. So now he picks a place that there's nowhere for the donkey to turn. And the ass saw the angel of the Lord, and she fell down under Balaam, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with a staff. So now he goes and takes his rod or staff and starts beating on the donkey, which wasn't nice. So again, he's letting his anger rule him, just like people do today. So we want to walk in the Spirit. Definitely Balaam, he knew God, and he was a prophet, but again, now he messed up. He got greed in his heart, and that's all he was seeing. He was seeing the dollar signs. If I can just get over there and keep asking God, maybe he'll let me do this. So Balaam is mentioned a lot of times in the Bible. Actually, he's mentioned 59 verses of the Bible spread across 8 books of the Bible. That would be 49 verses in Numbers, 3 in Joshua, 2 in Deuteronomy, 1 in Nehemiah and Micah, and 1 in 2 Peter, Jude, and Revelations. And all these tell us something. Joshua 24:10, it says, and God said, I would not hearken unto Balaam, therefore he blessed you still. In Deuteronomy 23:5, God would not hearken unto Balaam. So Balaam was asking. He's pointing out, he's asking, and I'm sure praying, just let me do this one little thing, if I can just go over there, you might change your mind. I might get this big reward. Well, if you'll just let me go, maybe at least the king will reward me something from a time of traveling. So he's looking for this reward. Again, God doesn't let Balaam curse Israel at this time, but Balaam will find another way to curse Israel indirectly, and this will cost 24,000 Israelites their life, and we'll get to that. But the devil has a way to up the stakes, and that's what he did in this case. He started out, he came with a little gift to the prophet, or to the diviner, or the seer in this case, but then he came back with a bigger gift. He offered him technically anything you want. All you got to do is ask, and I'll give it to you. That's what the devil will do if you entertain the devil. You know, if he doesn't get you with the first temptation, he'll come along, he'll up the stakes. Well, here's something even greater. You know, you didn't fall for this little offer, so now I'm going to make you a bigger offer. So make sure that we don't fall for the devil's tactics. James 4:7 says, "Submit yourself therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And so that's what Balaam wasn't doing. He wasn't resisting the devil. He was, entertaining him. Well, let's talk about this. Maybe I can ask God enough times. Maybe he'll let me do what he's already told me, sin. He should have known it wouldn't work, but that's what he continues to do. So then, so he's already been turned aside 3 times. And this is where we get to the talking donkey in verse 28. Any questions or comments up to this point, how Balaam's gotten to this point?
Brother Randy, you think Balaam turned from being a prophet that started out right to a prophet for hire?
Yeah.
He let that get in his heart. And that's why he kept leaving the door open. He was hoping for a reward or money. And I think at the end, he actually got it. You'll get into that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happened to his heart. And there was the donkey, beating on his donkey. When he had the gifts, actually the gifts of the Spirit came, with Pentecost, but there was gifts, special gifts given in that day through the Holy Spirit to prophets. And Balaam stopped using that gift in its proper manner. They use the gift of the flesh. You're beating on the donkey. See, we have gifts where we realize it or not. They're not good gifts. Don't misunderstand me. They're bad gifts, but they're of the flesh. Yeah. And we're either using the good one or we're using the bad one. And in this case, Balaam, because of his heart, that it became a heart, for hire.
Yeah.
And it was using the wrong sources.
Yeah, and that takes us right back to Galatians 5 that we just studied, since it ties right to this. Before God told us what the gift of the fruit of the Spirit was, he told us what the works of the flesh was, and he says that they don't work together. So they contend with each other. There's a fight going on. So what are we going to choose? Are we going to choose to, in this case, be blinded by first by greed and then by wrath? Hey, something's not working. My plans aren't working the way I want them to do, so I'm just going to get mad about it. He didn't stop and pray about it. It doesn't say, this trip's not going very good. I need to stop and, pray. My foot's hurting. Let me wrap my foot up, sit down and pray to God and see what I should do. In this case, he already knew what he should do. He should have stayed home, and now he should be going home, but he's still, he's looking for the money. And then it says in verse 28, "And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass, and she said unto Balaam, What have I done unto thee, that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? Balaam said unto the ass, Because thou hast mocked me, I would there were a sword in my hand, for now I would kill thee." So not only is he beaten on it, but he said, if I had a sword, I'd just go ahead and kill you. But look at what, here, sir, there's a miracle happening here. And surely Balaam should recognize this miracle, but he just goes through 3 verses of discussion, and he says, "And the ass said unto Balaam, Am I not thine ass, which thou hast ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do unto thee?" And he said, "Nay." So have I ever done this before? Have I ever acted up like this? Always do what you say. So surely there's some reason, and there was a reason. In the next verse, he'll see that reason. It says, "Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand, and he bowed down his head and fell flat on his face." So now he was blind. He was spiritually blinded because of his greed and his seeking to go into the sinful path, which he was definitely in. But now God opens his eyes. But the donkey seemed like he had more spiritual sense than this blinded Balaam, because he could see the angel all the time, and Balaam couldn't. So God can use some unexpected things to get our attention, and that's what he's doing in this case. Yeah. "And the angel of the Lord said unto him, So he first points out, why have you smitten your donkey these 3 times? But then he goes on and he says, behold, I went out to withstand thee because thy way is perverse before me. So again, he's pointing out, you don't want to hear that from God. You don't want him to say, hey, your way is perverse. That's not what we want to hear. That's not going to be enter into the joys of the Lord if your way is perverse. And the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times. Unless she had turned from me, surely now also I had slain thee and saved her alive. So the angel's saying, the donkey didn't have anything to fear. All she was doing is protecting you. But clearly, if she hadn't turned, I'd have already killed you. So that's the point that he's getting through finally to Balaam. And Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I knew not that thou stoodest in the way against me. Now therefore, if it displease thee, I will get me back again. So finally, Balaam at least admits he's sinned in his wrath of hitting the donkey, but he still doesn't quite get it, because what does he do? How much trouble does God have to go to get our attention? So first, he told him, don't go. He said, don't go and don't curse these people. He didn't listen. So then he didn't listen. He didn't wait for the people, the second group of princes to even come to him the next morning. He just got up and said, hey, it's time to go. So he's going on the wrong path. But now what does he say to the angel of the Lord? He says, if it displease thee, I will get me back again. So he's trying to bargain with God. Apologize, I hit my donkey, but if you really don't want me to go, then I'll turn back. How much more can God do to get our attention? He's already told him not to do it, and now he's got a talking donkey. He's just talking to him. He's telling him, donkey's trying to turn back because here's the angel of the Lord with his sword drawn. People still don't get it. So don't wait until God has to draw his sword that can cause you pain before you listen. Don't wait until we get to the judgment to wait, the judgment seat of Christ. Then it's going to be too late. Then we can't change. But God's given Balaam all these chances to change, but he still doesn't get it. He still says, it's probably okay if I go. So what happens in verse 35? It says that, and the angel of the Lord said unto Balaam, go with the men, but only the word which I shall speak unto thee, that thou shalt speak. So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. So he still goes. The angel does say, in this case, he says go. He doesn't condition it with anything. So why does God do that sometimes? So think about earthly kids, pick on Jared because he's got a lot of them. So do you ever tell your kids something like, years ago the mother would say, the kids, don't be fighting around this wood stove because, it's going to cause you some pain eventually. Don't get too close. Don't be, doing that, especially if you had a big family. We don't have wood stoves too much, so Jared might say to the kids, don't run fast down this gravel hill because it'll cause you some pain. You're going to end up tripping and getting scuffed up. But if you keep telling them that and they don't listen, eventually, you might just have to let them learn. So after they get scuffed up a few times, they'll think, hey, I shouldn't really be running down the hill on the gravel because I might get scuffed up. So sometimes God has to, again, let us cause ourselves some pain to get our attention. So that's what happened here. But Balaam, still, he didn't get the message, so he will listen to God. He's going to go with the king to 3 different places, and they're going to offer some sacrifices, and he's going to go and see what God wants him to say, and he's going to bless Israel 3 times. And then he'll go on and bless him a 4th time even after that. And that's where one of these, again, as Brother Lonnie pointed out in the reading, I said, if it were today, or if it was in the New Testament, what gift of the Spirit would we see in chapter 24 of Numbers? So I'm going to add that to your extended question that we'll talk about tonight if you'll look that up. But what Balaam did, which was even worse, he goes and counsels Balak even after all this. It says he went home. It says, king's mad at him because he didn't curse Israel, so he went home. But he doesn't stay home very much because they get back together. It doesn't say when, but all this happens again in a short time, because within a few weeks to a few months, chapter 31 of Numbers, Balak's gonna be dead. So what happens, and it becomes his plan because Moses points it out. It'll be pointed out in Revelations that Balak came up with a plan to cast another stumbling block before the children of Israel. Revelations 2:14, in the writing to the church of Pergamos, it says, "But I have a few things against thee, because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast stumbling blocks before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication." So even in Revelations, he's still talking about Balaam and what he did. So he gets with the King Balak, and he says, well, here's what we can do. God wouldn't let me curse him. I wanted, he didn't say it, but I'm sure it was in his conversation, because these other verses, it keeps saying God's withstanding him and he wouldn't hearken to him. He keeps wanting to do wrong. So he says, here's what I know about God. God says, if you don't follow my word, and if you worship other gods and you sin, then it's going to bring curses upon you. So he says, I can't curse them, but here's how we'll get them to curse themselves. So he talks to the Midianites and the Moabites. He talks to both of them, and they both send their women into the camp of Israel, and he says, you go seduce these Israelites and get them to enter into Baal worship. And Baal was of course, he was a false god, but he was a fertility god, and they mixed, as many false religions did, they mixed this worship of their false gods in with sexual sins. So they got Israel to commit fornication with these women, and they said, well, this is part of their plan, and we got to do this, and you got to eat these sacrifices to the idol, and then you got to bow down to this false god, because that's the way I do it. So they said, well, it sounds pretty good, I'll go along with it. And what did it cause? It caused a plague. God sent a plague to the Israelites. 24,000 of them perished. More would have perished if God hadn't have intervened with one of his priests. But it cost 24,000 Israelites their life.
Brother Randy, they still have that. They still struggle with that in Jesus' time, because the church of Pergamos or something, right? Brother, they were still having to deal with that. So you see what plague the Balak actually was able to inflict upon the Israelites. And they're still struggling with it. Still struggling with it today. Because it was strictly against the commandment of God.
But they fell right to it, because again, it was the temptation of the devil. Well, this is enticing. This looks good, So, and they fell for it, and it cost. Not only did it cost the 24,000 lives, but it cost the Midianites. They were destroyed. They were completely destroyed. God he still spared Moab, because he was promised to Lot. So he still didn't let them have the Moabites' land, and even though they were as guilty as the Midianites, but they still had to pay. And again, these weren't unrelated people, because guess what? The Midianites, they came, Moses was protected by the Midianites for 40 years. He married the daughter of the priest of Midian, Jethro. So that was, Moses' kinfolk. So they were all tied together. And Moses definitely would have, sent word to the Midianites through his family, his father-in-law, and tried to get them to not do what they did, but the devil tempted them, and ended up getting their nation wiped out. Because of sin. So we'll think about those questions, and we'll talk about it more tonight. Have a great one.